The judge ordered the tomb guard to remove his Medal of Honor, and his career ends in just 24 hours. For 8 years, he stood at America's most sacred ground, protecting the fallen, honoring the unknown. But now, one order threatens to erase his entire legacy. He saved a platoon in war. He walks with a limp that tells the story. And still, they want to take his honor away. The man behind it? A federal judge with a hidden grudge and a broken past no one dares to mention. What began as ceremony explodes into courtroom chaos, secret files, and a shocking discovery buried deep in military silence. Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances, backgrounds, and hearts. If values like respect, courage, and compassion still guide you, then you're part of this story too. Early in the morning, the sun threw long shadows across Arlington's peaceful grounds, where Staff Sergeant Jackson Thornfield stood at attention beside the tomb of the unknown soldier. His polished shoes reflected the golden light, and his ceremonial uniform was pressed to perfection, every medal and button gleaming. The Medal of Honor around his neck caught the sunlight, a constant reminder of both triumph and loss. Jackson adjusted his stance slightly, compensating for the familiar ache in his left leg. The old injury from Afghanistan barely slowed him down anymore, but on long days like this, it made its presence known. Still, he never let it affect his bearing during his sacred duty as a tomb guard. As he performed his measured 21 steps across the plaza, Jackson reflected on his 8 years of service at this hallowed ground. Each step was precisely executed, each turn crisp and formal, just as he had performed thousands of times before. The morning air was cool and clear, perfect for the Memorial Day ceremony that would begin in less than an hour. His mind drifted back to that fateful day in Afghanistan, not because he wanted to remember the pain, but because it had led him here. The ambush had come without warning, his platoon caught in a deadly crossfire. In those chaotic moments, training and instinct had taken over. He had managed to create a diversion, drawing enemy fire while his fellow soldiers reached safety. The cost had been high, shrapnel tearing through his leg, but every member of his platoon had survived. "The medal isn't just mine," Jackson whispered to himself during a moment of stillness at his post. It was something he had said countless times before, a personal mantra that kept him grounded. It belongs to every soldier who never made it home. The cemetery was already filling with visitors. Distinguished guests in formal attire made their way toward the ceremonial area. Federal judges in their dark suits, military officials in full-dress uniform. Jackson recognized several familiar faces from previous years' ceremonies, though he maintained his unwavering focus forward. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of fresh-cut grass and early summer flowers across the grounds. The thousands of white headstones stretched out in perfect formation, each one representing a story of service and sacrifice. Jackson felt a deep connection to every soul resting here, especially the unknown heroes he guarded. His fellow tomb guard, Private First Class Jenkins, approached for the changing of the guard. Their movements were synchronized with clockwork precision, a ritual they had performed countless times. Yet each performance carried the same weight of responsibility as the first. As Jackson executed the weapon inspection ritual, his movements deliberate and exact, he caught glimpses of the growing crowd. Children watched with wide-eyed wonder. Veterans stood at attention, and families huddled together in quiet reflection. This was why he wore the Medal of Honor during ceremonies, not for personal glory, but as a visible symbol of every sacrifice made in service to the nation. The morning sun climbed higher, and more dignitaries arrived for the Memorial Day ceremony. Jackson recognized General Harrison, who had presented him with the Medal of Honor 3 years ago. The general gave him a subtle nod of recognition, but Jackson maintained his stoic expression, focused entirely on his sacred duty. His next 21 steps were as precise as the first, despite the growing discomfort in his leg. The pain was a familiar companion now, one that reminded him of the cost of service. But like every other tomb guard, Jackson had memorized the names of every unknown soldier he protected. They had given everything, including their identities. His own discomfort seemed trivial in comparison. The crowd fell silent as the ceremony's start time approached. Jackson could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him, but his focus never wavered from his duty. Each step, each turn, each moment of his guard was performed with the same precision and reverence as always. To his right, a young boy whispered to his mother, "Why does that soldier have that special medal?" The mother quietly explained about heroes and sacrifice, about duty and honor. Jackson didn't react, but internally he appreciated the teaching moment. The Medal of Honor around his neck wasn't just his story. It was the story of every soldier who had ever served, every life lost in service to their country. The morning light now fully illuminated the inscription on the tomb. "Here rests in honored glory, an American soldier known but to God." Jackson had read these words countless times, but they never failed to stir something deep within him. His 8 years as a tomb guard had taught him that true honor wasn't in the medals or recognition, but in the quiet, steadfast dedication to something greater than oneself. As the distinguished guests took their places for the ceremony, Jackson continued his vigilant watch. The Medal of Honor caught the light with each precise movement, a beacon of sacrifice and service. In his heart, he dedicated each step, each moment of his watch to those who had given everything, the known and unknown heroes of American history. The high-profile Memorial Day ceremony was about to begin, but for Staff Sergeant Jackson Thornfield, this was more than just another day of duty. It was a continuation of a sacred trust, a promise to never forget, and a dedication to honor not just his own service, but the service of all who had come before him. Judge Harrison Torres stepped out of his black sedan, straightening his silk tie as he surveyed the growing crowd at Arlington National Cemetery. His polished shoes clicked against the pathway as he made his way toward the ceremonial grounds, nodding and smiling at familiar faces. Several reporters recognized him, their cameras clicking as he passed. Perfect. The publicity would help his upcoming campaign for the federal appeals court. The morning sun highlighted the silver in his hair as he joined a group of fellow judges and military officials. "Harrison," called out Judge Matthews, extending his hand. "Good to see you made it." Torres shook hands firmly, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. 8 years had passed since his son Daniel's death in Afghanistan, but Memorial Day always reopened that wound. Throughout the ceremony, Torres found his attention repeatedly drawn to the tomb guard performing his duties. Staff Sergeant Jackson Thornfield, the name had been in the program. Something about the soldier's bearing bothered him, but he couldn't place what, until a glint of sunlight caught the medal around the guard's neck. Torres's jaw clenched, a Medal of Honor, being worn during ceremonial duties at the tomb of the unknown soldier. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair as anger and grief twisted inside him. His son Daniel had died saving his entire unit, but the Army had buried the story to protect a general's reputation. And now this soldier dared to parade his medal here, at this sacred place? The ceremony concluded with a 21-gun salute that made Torres flinch despite himself. As the crowd began to disperse, he remained seated, watching Thornfield complete his final guard rotation. The soldier's slight limp was barely noticeable in his precise movements, but Torres saw it as another sign of disrespect, this injured man performing duties that should be flawless. Once Thornfield was relieved of his post, Torres approached him with purposeful strides. "Staff Sergeant Thornfield," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of the federal bench. "A word, if you please." Jackson turned, standing at attention despite having just completed his shift. "Yes, Your Honor?" "I couldn't help but notice you're wearing your Medal of Honor during your guard duty." Torres's tone was cold, professional. "Are you aware this violates military protocol?" "Sir, with respect, it does not," Jackson replied evenly. "The Medal of Honor is authorized for wear during ceremonial duties, especially on days of remembrance." Torres stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This is the tomb of the unknown soldier, Staff Sergeant. These men died without recognition, without medals, without even their names being known. And you parade your decoration here? It's an insult to their sacrifice." Jackson stood his ground, though his expression showed he understood the weight of the accusation. "Your Honor, I wear this medal to honor them. Every step I take at this post, every ceremony I participate in, is dedicated to those who never came home to receive their own recognition. Pretty words, Staff Sergeant, but this isn't about poetry. It's about protocol and respect. Torres's grief fueled his anger, memories of Daniel's unmarked heroism burning in his chest. Remove the medal, now. I cannot and will not do that, sir. Jackson's voice remained respectful but firm. This medal was earned through sacrifice, not just mine but my entire platoon's. Wearing it here isn't about personal glory. It represents every soldier who gave everything for their country, known and unknown. The judge's face flushed red. You're refusing a direct request from a federal judge? I'm following my duty and my conscience, Your Honor. The medal stays. Torres stepped even closer, close enough to see the small scar above Jackson's right eyebrow. Then perhaps you need a lesson in legal consequences, Staff Sergeant. There are regulations about proper military conduct, and I assure you I can find several that will end your career here at Arlington. A small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the confrontation unfold. Jackson remained at attention, his voice steady. If you wish to pursue legal action, that is your right, Your Honor, but I will continue to wear this medal with the honor and respect it represents. You speak of honor? Torres's voice cracked slightly. Do you know how many heroes lie in these grounds without medals, without recognition, without even their names on their headstones? And you stand here flaunting your award like some kind of— Your Honor, Jackson interrupted softly, his tone gentler now. Every unknown soldier in these grounds earned the right to be called hero. My medal belongs to them as much as it belongs to me. When visitors see it, they don't just see my story. They see the story of every soldier who sacrificed everything. Torres's hands trembled slightly as he straightened his jacket. You'll be hearing from my office, Staff Sergeant. I promise you that. He turned sharply and strode away, leaving Jackson standing at attention near the tomb he had sworn to guard. The gathered observers slowly dispersed, whispering among themselves. Jackson remained motionless for a moment longer, his hand unconsciously rising to touch the Medal of Honor that hung around his neck. 8 years of guarding the tomb had taught him that some battles weren't fought with weapons, but with conviction and principle. This, he knew, was just the beginning. Jackson sat at his desk in the tomb guard quarters, staring at the official court order that had been delivered just minutes ago. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. Judge Torres hadn't wasted any time. It had been less than 3 hours since their confrontation at the Memorial Day ceremony. The legal document was filled with complex terminology, but its message was crystal clear. He had 24 hours to remove his Medal of Honor during ceremonial duties or face immediate dismissal from his position and possible court-martial. The judge had somehow managed to expedite a military court hearing for the following afternoon. This can't be happening, Jackson muttered, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. 8 years of dedicated service at the tomb, thousands of hours standing guard in every kind of weather, countless ceremonies performed with unwavering precision, and it could all end tomorrow because one judge took offense at his medal. His phone buzzed on the desk, displaying a message from his commanding officer. My office. Now. Jackson stood up, straightening his uniform jacket out of habit. The Medal of Honor caught the fluorescent light as he moved, and he touched it briefly, drawing strength from what it represented. Colonel Matthews was waiting for him, looking grave. At ease, Staff Sergeant. He gestured to a chair. I just got off the phone with the JAG office. Judge Torres has some serious political pull, and he's using all of it. He's convinced several senior officers that your wearing the medal during ceremonies is disrespectful to the unknown soldiers. Sir, that's not true, Jackson protested. The medal represents— I know what it represents, Thornfield, the colonel interrupted gently. But this isn't about truth anymore. It's about legal interpretation and political pressure. The hearing is scheduled for 1400 hours tomorrow. If you don't comply with the order before then— He left the sentence unfinished. Jackson leaned forward. Colonel, you know my record. You know why I wear the medal during ceremonies. There has to be something we can do. You need legal representation and fast. Colonel Matthews slid a business card across his desk. Captain Rebecca Sterling. She's one of the best military lawyers I know, and she has experience with cases involving Medal of Honor recipients. Jackson picked up the card, recognition flickering across his face. Rebecca Sterling. We served together in Afghanistan, before my last deployment. She was attached to our unit as legal counsel. Then you know she's good. Call her immediately. The colonel stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. And Thornfield? Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know you've served with distinction at the tomb. Don't let anyone tell you different. Back in his quarters, Jackson dialed Rebecca's number. His heart was pounding harder than it had during any ceremony. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Captain Sterling. Rebecca? This is Jackson Thornfield. I don't know if you remember me from Afghanistan. Jackson? Her voice warmed with recognition. Of course I remember you. I was there when they presented you with the Medal of Honor. What's going on? He explained the situation, trying to keep his voice steady as he described Torres's threats and the rushed court order. Rebecca listened without interrupting, but he could hear her sharp intake of breath when he mentioned the 24-hour deadline. They can't do this, she said when he finished. Well, technically they can, but it's a gross abuse of judicial power. Where are you now? At Arlington, in the Tomb Guard quarters. Stay there. I'm leaving my office now. I can be there in 30 minutes. We need to start preparing your defense immediately. Rebecca. Jackson hesitated. I know this is short notice, and it could be politically dangerous for you to take this case. Jackson, you saved 12 lives in that ambush in Afghanistan. You took 3 bullets protecting your men, and you never once thought about the personal cost. Her voice was firm. Let me do this. We're not losing this fight. 40 minutes later, Rebecca strode into the Tomb Guard quarters. She looked exactly as Jackson remembered, confident, professional, with an intensity in her eyes that suggested she was already forming legal strategies. She wore her service uniform with the same precision he did, though her medals were considerably fewer than his. Show me everything, she said without preamble, setting her briefcase on his desk. The court order, any communication from Torres's office, everything. As Jackson handed her the documents, their fingers brushed briefly. He felt a familiar flutter in his chest, the same one he'd experienced years ago in Afghanistan when they'd worked together. But this wasn't the time for such thoughts. Rebecca scanned the papers quickly, her frown deepening. This is worse than I thought. Torres is not just using his position. He's calling in favors from half the military justice system. He wants to make an example of you. But why? Jackson asked. What did I do to make him so angry? That's what we need to find out. Rebecca looked up from the papers, her expression softening slightly. Jackson, I have to ask. Are you sure you want to fight this? You could comply with the order. Keep your position. No. Jackson stood straighter, his hand going to his medal. This isn't about me, Rebecca. Every time I stand guard wearing this medal, it reminds visitors that the unknown soldiers we're honoring were heroes too. They gave everything, their lives, their identities, everything. Wearing this medal during ceremonies doesn't dishonor them. It honors their sacrifice. Rebecca watched him for a long moment, then nodded. That's what I needed to hear. She checked her watch. We have less than 22 hours to prepare your defense. The hearing is at 1400 hours tomorrow, and Torres will have every advantage. Time, influence, preparation. What are our chances? Jackson asked quietly. Rebecca started organizing the documents into neat piles. Honestly, not good, but I've never let bad odds stop me before. She looked up at him with a determined smile. And something tells me you haven't either. Rebecca spread dozens of legal documents across Jackson's desk, her fingers tracing patterns between different cases as she connected invisible dots. The fluorescent lights of the Tomb Guard quarters cast harsh shadows on the papers, making the text appear even more stark and official. This goes deeper than we thought, Rebecca said, her voice tight with concern. She pulled out 3 specific files and laid them side by side. These are cases from the past 18 months, all Medal of Honor recipients, all targeted through different legal channels, but there's one common thread: Judge Harrison Torres. Jackson leaned forward, scanning the documents. What happened to them? Lieutenant James Cooper, Minneapolis. Torres found a technicality in his service record and filed a challenge that resulted in his veterans' benefits being suspended. Rebecca pointed to the next file. Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, San Antonio. Torres questioned the validity of his medal citation, tied him up in legal proceedings until he couldn't afford to fight anymore. Lost his benefits, too. Jackson's jaw clenched. And the third? Chief Petty Officer Michael Chen, Seattle. Torres's most recent target before you. He challenged Chen's disability status, claimed his Medal of Honor citation didn't support his injury claims. Chen lost everything: benefits, housing allowance, medical care. Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. He's living with his elderly parents now. Jackson sank into his chair, the weight of this revelation pressing down on him. So, I'm not the first. He's been doing this systematically, targeting Medal of Honor recipients across the country. He looked up at Rebecca. But why? What does he gain from this? Rebecca pulled out another document, this one older and more worn. I think I found the answer. It took some digging, but... She handed Jackson a military casualty report. Private First Class Daniel Torres, the judge's son. Jackson read the report carefully. Killed in action in Afghanistan 4 years ago. Look at the location, Rebecca said quietly. Kandahar Province. Jackson's voice trailed off as recognition hit him. That's where I earned my medal. Same region, same time period. Rebecca nodded, pulling up a chair beside him. Daniel Torres died saving his entire squad during an ambush. According to witness statements, he held off enemy forces single-handedly while his team evacuated wounded soldiers. He was killed just as reinforcements arrived. Sounds like Medal of Honor-worthy actions to me, Jackson said. The Army thought so too, initially. Rebecca pulled out more documents. There were recommendations, supporting statements from his entire chain of command. But something happened. The paperwork was buried, the witnesses were reassigned, and Daniel Torres received a Silver Star posthumously instead. Jackson stood up and paced the small office, his slight limp more pronounced with fatigue. So that's what this is about. Torres lost his son, and now he's targeting Medal of Honor recipients because his son never received one. It's more complicated than that, Rebecca said, shuffling through more papers. I found hints in some classified documents. There might have been a cover-up. Something about protecting a high-ranking general who made mistakes that day. Daniel's heroism was downplayed to avoid scrutiny of the entire operation. Jackson stopped pacing. So Torres's son was denied recognition to protect someone else's career? His voice was heavy with disgust. That's my theory. Rebecca gathered the documents into neat piles. But proving it would be nearly impossible. The records are sealed, the witnesses scattered, and Torres probably doesn't even know this part. He just knows his son died a hero and never received the recognition he deserved. So he's using his position as a federal judge to punish other Medal of Honor recipients, Jackson said, making us pay for the recognition his son never got. Rebecca stood up and walked to where Jackson stood. This changes things, Jackson. We're not just fighting one rushed court order anymore. We're up against a grieving father with immense legal power who's been plotting these attacks for years. Those other veterans, Jackson said, picking up the 3 files of Torres's previous targets. Cooper, Rodriguez, Chen. They were all alone when he came after them. No legal support, no way to fight back. They didn't stand a chance, Rebecca agreed. Torres knew exactly how to pressure them, which buttons to push, which regulations to cite. He's been perfecting his strategy with each case. Jackson turned to face her, his expression determined. Then we need to make sure I'm not just another name on his list, not just for me, but for them too, and for Daniel Torres. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. For Daniel? His father's using his death as a weapon, hurting other veterans because of his own pain. Jackson touched his Medal of Honor unconsciously. That's not honoring his son's sacrifice. That's twisting it into something ugly. Rebecca checked her watch. It was well past midnight. We have less than 14 hours until the hearing. Torres will be prepared, and he'll have the full weight of his previous victories behind him. Then we better get to work, Jackson said, pulling his chair back to the desk. Those other veterans didn't have anyone in their corner. I do. Rebecca smiled slightly, but her eyes remained serious. You know this could get ugly. Torres won't hesitate to use everything he has against you. Your service record, your medal citation, even your current duties at the tomb. He'll try to turn it all against you. I know, Jackson said quietly, but sometimes the right fights are the hardest ones. They bent over the documents together, their shoulders nearly touching as they prepared for the battle ahead. The night grew older, but neither noticed as they built their defense, piece by piece, against a man whose grief had turned to vengeance, and whose power had become a weapon against the very heroes his son had died alongside. Rebecca burst into the tomb guard quarters just before dawn, clutching a thick manila envelope. Her normally neat appearance was disheveled, with loose strands of hair falling around her face. Jackson, who had been reviewing legal documents at his desk, looked up in surprise. I found it, she said breathlessly, spreading the contents of the envelope across his desk. I called in every favor I had at the Pentagon archives. These documents were buried deep, but they tell the real story of what happened to Daniel Torres. Jackson pushed aside his other papers, focusing on the newly revealed documents. What did you find? It was in Kandahar province, just like we thought, Rebecca said, pointing to a heavily redacted mission report. But the official story, the one that led to his silver star, that wasn't what really happened. She pulled out several witness statements, their yellow pages marked with classified stamps. Daniel's unit was ordered to clear a village suspected of harboring Taliban fighters. General Howard Matthews gave the order, but his intelligence was wrong. The village was full of civilians, including women and children. Jackson leaned forward, his eyes scanning the documents. Go on. General Matthews ordered the unit to withdraw immediately to avoid any civilian casualties that might create diplomatic problems. But Daniel... Rebecca's voice softened. Daniel saw wounded civilians, children who had been caught in earlier crossfire. He disobeyed the direct order to withdraw. Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. He stayed to help them. Yes. Rebecca spread out more papers. These are statements from his squad mates. Daniel refused to leave the wounded behind. He started treating injured children, helping them evacuate. That's when the Taliban actually did show up. Jackson closed his eyes for a moment, already seeing where this was heading. He protected the civilians. Single-handedly, Rebecca confirmed. He held off the Taliban forces while continuing to help wounded children reach safety. His actions saved 23 civilian lives, including 15 children, but by the time reinforcements arrived, he was gone, Jackson finished quietly. The army covered it up, Rebecca continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. General Matthews couldn't afford to have anyone look too closely at his faulty intelligence or the orders he gave. So Daniel's true actions were buried. The official report only mentioned generic combat heroism and downplayed the civilian rescue aspect entirely. Jackson stood up and walked to the window, watching the first hints of sunrise over Arlington's endless rows of white headstones. His hand unconsciously touched his Medal of Honor. He did exactly what I did. Rebecca nodded. Your citation reads almost identically to the original recommendation for Daniel's Medal of Honor, before it was buried. You both chose to protect others against overwhelming odds. You both disobeyed orders to save lives. The only difference is that you survived to receive recognition, and Daniel's sacrifice was hidden to protect a general's career, Jackson said, his voice rough with emotion. No wonder Judge Torres is so angry. His son died a hero, and the army pretended it never happened. Torres doesn't even know the full truth, Rebecca added. He just knows his son died and didn't receive the recognition he deserved. He doesn't know about General Matthews or the cover-up. Jackson turned back from the window, his face showing the weight of this revelation. All this time, I've been thinking of Torres as this vindictive judge abusing his power. But he's really just a father who lost his son, a son who died performing the same acts of heroism that I was honored for. It doesn't excuse what he's doing to Medal of Honor recipients, Rebecca said gently. No, it doesn't, Jackson agreed. But I understand it now. Every time he sees someone like me receiving recognition, It must feel like a personal betrayal, like the world is celebrating in others what was denied to his son. Rebecca gathered the documents carefully. This changes our strategy for the hearing. We could use this information. No, Jackson interrupted firmly. We're not using Daniel's story as a weapon against his father. That would make us no better than the people who covered it up in the first place. Then what do you want to do? Jackson sat back down at his desk, his posture straight despite his exhaustion. Daniel Torres died performing an act of heroism that would have earned him the Medal of Honor if the truth hadn't been buried. His father deserves to know that, not as ammunition in a legal battle, but because it's the right thing to do. Even though he's trying to destroy your career, Rebecca asked. Especially because of that, Jackson said. His anger comes from a place of deep pain and injustice. Maybe if he knows the truth about his son's sacrifice, he can find peace with it. Maybe then he can stop trying to tear down other soldiers who received the recognition Daniel deserved. Rebecca studied Jackson for a long moment. You're a better person than most, Jackson. Many would use this information to save themselves and damn the consequences. That's not what the Medal of Honor represents, Jackson said quietly. It's not about personal glory or legal victories. It's about sacrifice and duty. Daniel Torres lived up to those ideals just as much as any recipient. His father needs to know that. We still have the hearing in a few hours, Rebecca reminded him. Then we better figure out how to handle this the right way, Jackson said. Because this isn't just about saving my career anymore. It's about honoring a fallen hero who never got the recognition he deserved. They bent over the documents together as dawn broke over Arlington, its light touching the countless headstones of heroes both known and unknown, including somewhere among them, the final resting place of Private Daniel Torres, whose true story was finally coming to light. Jackson paced the small conference room where he and Rebecca were preparing for the hearing. Early morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the scattered legal documents on the table. His Medal of Honor caught the sunlight as he moved, sending small flashes across the wall. We could use these documents to completely discredit Torres's legal standing, Rebecca said, organizing papers into neat stacks. Show that his vendetta against Medal of Honor recipients stems from personal grief rather than legal merit. Jackson stopped pacing and leaned against the window frame, watching people arrive for the day's proceedings. That feels wrong, he said quietly. Using a father's grief about his son as a weapon? That's not who I am. Rebecca looked up, surprise crossing her face. Jackson, he's trying to destroy your career. He's already hurt other recipients. We have to fight back. I know. Jackson turned to face her. But I keep thinking about what it must be like for him. Every time he sees someone like me receiving recognition, it must tear him apart inside. His son died performing the same kind of heroic acts I did, but Daniel's sacrifice was buried and forgotten. That doesn't excuse his actions, Rebecca insisted. No, it doesn't, Jackson agreed. But it helps me understand them. This isn't really about military protocols or legal precedents. It's about a father's broken heart. Through the window, Jackson spotted Judge Torres arriving. The older man looked disheveled, nothing like his usual polished appearance. His tie was crooked, and his movements were jerky and agitated as he snapped at his aide. Something's not right with him, Jackson observed. Look at how he's acting. Rebecca joined him at the window. They watched as Torres nearly knocked over a young lieutenant, barely seeming to notice. His hands shook as he fumbled with his briefcase. He seems unstable, Rebecca said. More than just angry or grieving, almost paranoid. The weight of carrying this pain for so long, Jackson mused, of believing his son's sacrifice went unrecognized. It must be eating him alive. Rebecca touched Jackson's arm gently. You're showing a lot of compassion for someone who's targeting you. Because I understand sacrifice now in a way I didn't before, Jackson said. When I earned this medal, I thought it was about what I did that day in Afghanistan. But standing guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier taught me something different. It's about honoring all sacrifice, recognized or not. He touched his Medal of Honor thoughtfully. Daniel Torres deserved this every bit as much as I do. His father knows that in his heart, even if he doesn't know the full story yet. That's what's driving him. So what do you want to do? Rebecca asked. We need to find a way to honor Daniel's sacrifice without destroying his father in the process, Jackson said. There has to be a path that brings healing instead of more pain. Rebecca began gathering their materials for the hearing. That's a noble goal, Jackson, but Torres isn't exactly in a place to listen right now. Did you see how agitated he was? Then we need to find the right moment, Jackson insisted, when he's ready to hear the truth about his son. Not to win a legal battle, but because Daniel's story deserves to be told. Through the window, they watched Torres enter the building, his movements still erratic. His face showed a mix of anger and something else, fear perhaps, or desperation. He's spiraling, Rebecca observed. This vendetta has consumed him completely. Which makes it even more important that we handle this right, Jackson said. If we use Daniel's story as a weapon, we'll only push him further into darkness. But if we can help him see that his son's sacrifice mattered. Rebecca studied Jackson for a long moment. You know, when I first took this case, I thought it was about defending your right to wear that medal. But you're showing me it's about something much bigger. It's about what the medal truly represents, Jackson said. Not glory or recognition, but sacrifice and duty. Daniel lived up to those ideals just as much as any recipient. His father needs to know that, not to win a legal argument, but because it's the truth. They gathered their materials and prepared to head to the hearing room. Jackson took one last look at the documents revealing Daniel's true story. We'll hold on to these for now, he said. Wait for the right moment. Judge Torres needs to hear this from a place of compassion, not confrontation. And in the meantime? Rebecca asked. He's still trying to end your career. In the meantime, we defend my position legally, but without attacking him personally, Jackson said firmly. We stay focused on the principles at stake, not the pain driving his actions. As they walked toward the hearing room, they passed more people who noticed Torres's unusual behavior. The judge was currently berating a security guard about checking his credentials, his voice rising unnaturally. Whatever's going on with him, Jackson said quietly. He needs help, not hatred. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show compassion to those who seem least deserving of it. Rebecca squeezed his arm supportively. You're a good man, Jackson Thornfield. I just hope your compassion doesn't cost you everything you've worked for. Some things matter more than career or status, Jackson replied, straightening his uniform. Daniel Torres understood that when he gave his life to save those civilians. The least I can do is honor his sacrifice by showing his father the same kind of courage. The courage to choose what's right over what's easy. They paused outside the hearing room doors, where they could hear Torres's agitated voice through the walls. Jackson took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Ready? Rebecca asked. Ready to do this the right way, Jackson answered. For Daniel, for his father, and for everything this medal truly represents. The hearing room buzzed with nervous energy as military officials and legal personnel filed in. Jackson noticed two plain-clothed security officers positioned near the exits, unusual for a standard military hearing. Rebecca was absorbed in her phone, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through messages. Jackson, she whispered urgently, touching his arm. We need to step outside, now. They excused themselves just as Judge Torres entered through another door, still looking agitated. In the hallway, Rebecca pulled Jackson into a quiet alcove, her face grave. I just received intelligence from my military contacts, she said, keeping her voice low. There's a reason Torres has been acting so erratic. He's been receiving death threats. Jackson straightened. Death threats? From whom? Militant extremist groups. Rebecca showed him her phone, displaying redacted intelligence reports. They view his legal attacks on Medal of Honor recipients as an assault on American military honor. They're calling him a traitor, threatening retaliation. Jackson scanned the documents, his military training kicking in as he assessed the threat level. The messages were specific and coordinated, suggesting organized groups rather than random individuals. These aren't just angry emails, he said. They're conducting surveillance on him, tracking his movements. They know his routines. Rebecca nodded grimly. It gets worse. Look at the latest intel. She swiped to another document, this one marked urgent. Jackson felt his stomach tighten as he read. The extremists weren't just targeting Torres. They saw Jackson as part of the story too. To them, he represented everything Torres was trying to tear down. They're watching both of us, Jackson realized. They see this legal battle as symbolic, Torres versus the decorated war hero. The groups are fracturing into two camps, Rebecca explained. Some see you as a victim of Torres's crusade. Others view you as weak for not fighting back harder against his legal challenges. Either way, they're using this situation to justify violent action. A commotion down the hall drew their attention. Judge Torres was arguing with his security detail, insisting he didn't need protection. His voice carried through the corridor, tinged with panic. That's why he's been so unstable, Jackson said quietly. He's not just angry anymore, he's scared. The threat started 3 weeks ago, Rebecca confirmed, right after he filed the action against you. The extremists see this case as the last straw. Intelligence suggests they're planning something imminent. Jackson watched Torres through the doorway. The judge's hands trembled as he arranged papers on his desk, his eyes darting to the windows. The man's fear was palpable now that Jackson knew what to look for. We have to tell him, Jackson said. Rebecca grabbed his arm. Tell him what? That you know he's being threatened? That won't help your case? This isn't about the case anymore. Jackson straightened his uniform. Those militants are using our conflict to justify violence. They're twisting everything the Medal of Honor stands for into something ugly. Jackson. Rebecca's voice was gentle but firm. He's still trying to destroy your career. You don't owe him anything. This isn't about owing. Jackson touched his Medal of Honor. This is about duty, about protecting people, even those who might be enemies. That's what this medal really means. Through the doorway, they could see Torres dismissing his security detail. The judge's face was pale, his movements jerky as he kept glancing toward the windows. He's making himself vulnerable, Jackson observed, pushing away protection because he doesn't want to appear weak. The intelligence suggests multiple groups are coordinating, Rebecca said. They're watching the courthouse. This hearing is a perfect opportunity for them to make some kind of statement. Jackson studied the layout of the room, his combat instincts assessing angles and vulnerabilities, the large windows, the multiple access points, the crowd of people filing in. We need to postpone the hearing, he said. Get him to a secure location until we can properly evaluate the threat. You realize that would give him more time to build his case against you? Jackson nodded. Some things are more important than winning legal battles. Rebecca touched his arm gently. This is why you earned that medal, isn't it? This instinct to protect others, even at a cost to yourself. The medal represents service above self, Jackson said. That doesn't stop just because someone becomes your adversary. They watched as Torres continued to arrange and rearrange papers on his desk, his movements becoming more frantic. The judge was trying to maintain his authoritative demeanor, but fear radiated from every gesture. He's not just afraid for himself, Jackson realized. He's afraid this will somehow dishonor his son's memory. That's why he won't accept protection. He thinks he has to be strong for Daniel. Rebecca checked another message on her phone, her expression growing more concerned. Intel confirms increased chatter this morning. Multiple known extremists have been spotted in the area. Jackson straightened his shoulders, decision made. We need to get him out of here. Now. And your hearing? Can wait. Jackson moved toward the doorway. Right now, we need to convince a grieving, frightened father that accepting help isn't a betrayal of his son's sacrifice. Rebecca gathered their materials quickly. How are you going to do that? By helping him understand what real strength looks like, Jackson said. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit when we need protection. They watched Torres continue his nervous movements, a man trying desperately to maintain control while his world spun into chaos. Jackson took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Time to show him that this medal means protecting everyone, he said quietly, even those who might hate us for it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Arlington's pristine grounds as Jackson made his way toward the tomb of the unknown soldier. Despite the tension of recent days, His steps remained measured and precise. 21 steps, the turn, 21 steps back. The weight of his Medal of Honor felt especially heavy today as he contemplated the morning's revelations about the threats against both him and Judge Torres. A small group of visitors gathered near the memorial, including Torres himself, who stood apart from others, his posture rigid with barely contained anxiety. The judge had refused to cancel his scheduled visit to the cemetery, insisting on maintaining his normal routine despite the security warnings. Jackson noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Something wasn't right. Years of combat training heightened his awareness as he spotted 3 men moving with tactical precision through the trees, their civilian clothes doing little to hide their military-style movements. Before he could radio for backup, the first shot cracked through the air. "Everybody down!" Jackson shouted, his voice carrying the authority of command. Visitors scattered, screaming and ducking behind memorial walls as more shots followed. Through the chaos, Jackson spotted Judge Torres frozen in place, exposed on the memorial steps. The judge's eyes were wide with terror, his body paralyzed by the sudden violence desecrating this sacred ground. Jackson didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward Torres, his slight limp forgotten as adrenaline surged through his body. The militants were closing in, their weapons trained on the judge. Time seemed to slow as Jackson's combat instincts took over. "Contact, 3 shooters," he called out to the cemetery guards while running. "Armed hostiles approaching from the west." Another burst of gunfire erupted. Jackson launched himself forward, tackling Torres just as bullets sparked off the stone where the judge had been standing. They rolled behind a low wall, Jackson's body shielding the older man from the assault. "Stay down!" Jackson commanded, positioning himself between Torres and the threats. The judge was trembling, his face ash-white. "Why?" Torres gasped. "Why are you protecting me?" Jackson checked their surroundings, tracking the militants' movements. "Because it's what your son would have done." The words hit Torres like a physical blow. His eyes filled with tears as the truth of that statement sank in. The attackers were advancing, using the memorial's columns for cover. Jackson could hear police sirens in the distance, but they wouldn't arrive in time. He had to act now. "When I move, you run for the guard station," Jackson instructed Torres. "Don't stop. Don't look back." "You'll be killed," Torres protested. "This is what the medal means, sir," Jackson said firmly. "Protecting others, no matter the cost." Before Torres could argue further, Jackson sprang into action. He moved with the fluid precision of his combat training, drawing the attacker's fire away from Torres's position. The judge scrambled toward safety as Jackson engaged the first militant. The attacker's weapon came up, but Jackson was faster. He disarmed the man with a swift strike, using the militant's own momentum to throw him off balance. The second attacker rushed forward, and Jackson met him with calculated force, his movements economical and deadly. Gunfire continued to echo across the hallowed grounds as Jackson fought. Each shot felt like a desecration of this sacred space, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate threat. The third militant had circled around, trying to flank him. Jackson's leg screamed in protest as he pivoted, his old injury threatening to slow him down. But here, in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier, he found strength in what this place represented, the ultimate sacrifice of countless unnamed heroes. He caught movement behind a column and rolled, narrowly avoiding another burst of gunfire. In one fluid motion, he came up behind the third attacker, subduing him with a precise chokehold. The militant slumped unconscious as police sirens grew closer. Cemetery guards converged on the scene, securing the fallen attackers as Jackson did a final sweep of the area. His breath came in sharp bursts, his leg throbbing, but his military bearing remained intact. Judge Torres emerged from the guard station supported by 2 officers. The judge's face was transformed by what he'd witnessed, the hatred and bitterness replaced by something like wonder as he stared at Jackson. "You could have let them kill me," Torres said quietly. "After what I've done to you, no one would have blamed you." Jackson straightened, wincing slightly at the pain in his leg. "That's not what this medal represents, sir. It's not about blame or revenge. It's about service, about protecting others no matter who they are." Torres's eyes filled with tears as he looked past Jackson to the tomb of the unknown soldier. "That's what Daniel did, wasn't it?" protected others without thinking of himself? Yes, sir, Jackson said gently. Your son was a hero, just like every unnamed soldier resting here. Police and military personnel swarmed the area, securing the scene and treating the injured. But Jackson and Torres remained still, standing before the tomb as morning sunlight washed over its white marble surface. I've dishonored him, Torres whispered. Dishonored all of them with my hatred. Jackson touched his Medal of Honor. It's not too late to honor him differently, sir, to celebrate the kind of sacrifice he chose to make. Torres nodded slowly, his shoulders straightening as if a great weight was lifting. Here, in this sacred place where Jackson had risked everything to save him, the judge finally began to understand what true honor meant. The morning calm returned to Arlington as emergency vehicles departed, leaving behind an unsettling quiet. Jackson sat on a bench near the tomb of the unknown soldier, his leg throbbing from the morning's exertion. Judge Torres approached slowly, his usual commanding presence subdued by the day's events. May I? Torres gestured to the empty space on the bench. Jackson nodded, shifting slightly to make room. For a long moment, both men sat in silence, watching the morning sun climb higher over the endless rows of white headstones. I never thanked you properly, Torres finally said, his voice rough with emotion. You saved my life today. Just doing what needed to be done, sir. Torres turned to face him. No, it was more than that. You protected someone who's been trying to destroy your career. I need to understand why. Jackson took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment to share what he'd learned. Sir, before I answer that, there's something you need to know about your son. Torres stiffened, his hands gripping his knees. What could you possibly know about Daniel? We found documents during our investigation, Jackson said gently, about what really happened the day he died. Tears welled in Torres's eyes. They told me he was killed in a routine operation. That's all they ever said. He died saving civilians, sir, after disobeying direct orders to abandon them. Jackson watched understanding dawn on the judge's face. He chose to stay behind when his unit was ordered to retreat. He helped evacuate 3 families from a combat zone, knowing he was exposing himself to enemy fire. Torres's breath caught. Why wasn't I told? The original orders came from General Matthews. Evacuating those civilians would have revealed his tactical mistake. The army chose to protect him by burying the truth about Daniel's sacrifice. My son, Torres's voice broke. He died a hero? Yes, sir. The same kind of hero you've been fighting against. Jackson touched his Medal of Honor. Daniel did exactly what I did in Afghanistan, put others before himself. The only difference is that his sacrifice was hidden while mine was recognized. Tears streamed down Torres's face. All this time I've been so angry, seeing others receive honors while Daniel's memory faded away. I convinced myself they couldn't deserve it if he didn't get it. Your son deserves recognition, sir, but diminishing other heroes won't give him that. Jackson leaned forward, his voice earnest. Let me help you fight for Daniel's truth. Not by tearing others down, but by lifting his story up where it belongs. Torres wiped his eyes. Why would you help me after everything I've done? Because every hero deserves to be remembered. Jackson gestured to the tomb before them. That's what this place stands for. Not just the named heroes, but all of them. Daniel belongs among them. I've been so blind, Torres whispered, trying to honor him by dishonoring others. He would have hated that. He sounds like the kind of soldier who understood true sacrifice, Jackson said. The kind who knew that heroism isn't about recognition. It's about doing what's right, no matter the cost. Torres nodded slowly. Like what you did today. You could have used this information against me, destroyed my reputation. Instead, you protected me, just like Daniel protected those civilians. Because that's what the medal really means, sir. It's not about glory or status. It's about service. Jackson touched the medal again. Every time I wear this, I'm not just representing my own actions. I'm representing every soldier who ever put others before themselves, including your son. I see that now, Torres said quietly. I see you now, not just as another medal recipient, but as someone who embodies everything Daniel believed in. Jackson straightened. Help me make this right, sir. Let me testify about what we've discovered. Together, we can bring Daniel's story to light and honor his sacrifice properly. You'd do that? Torres asked. Even after I tried to take away your position here? Of course, because honoring your son's heroism doesn't diminish anyone else's sacrifice. It elevates us all. Jackson gestured to the endless rows of headstones. Every story of courage deserves to be told. Daniel's most of all. Torres stood slowly, his bearing different now, less rigid with anger, more weighted with understanding. I've wasted so much time fighting the wrong battle. Instead of tearing down heroes, I should have been fighting to reveal my son's truth. It's not too late to change that, sir. Jackson rose beside him, favoring his injured leg slightly. Let's make sure Daniel's story is finally told. Torres extended his hand. I'd be honored to fight alongside you this time, Sergeant Thornfield, for the right cause. Jackson shook his hand firmly, feeling the moment's significance. Here, before the tomb of the unknown soldier, antagonist and defender had found common ground in their shared respect for sacrifice and true heroism. Your son would be proud, sir, Jackson said softly. Not just of what he did, but of what you're choosing to do now. Torres nodded, looking out over Arlington's sacred grounds with new eyes. The morning sun illuminated the white headstones, each one representing a story of service and sacrifice. Among them, Daniel's story waited to be told, not as a weapon against other heroes, but as another shining example of the courage that made this hallowed place what it was. The military courtroom buzzed with tension as Jackson took his place at the witness stand. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The panel of officers sat stern-faced behind their elevated bench, their brass insignias gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Captain Rebecca Sterling stood at the defense table, her posture confident despite the unusual turn their strategy had taken. Judge Torres sat in the front row, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed intently on Jackson. Staff Sergeant Thornfield, Rebecca began, please tell the court about your investigation into Private Daniel Torres's service record. Jackson straightened in his chair, his voice clear and steady. During our preparation for this hearing, we uncovered classified documents regarding Private Torres's final mission in Afghanistan. These records reveal that on April 15, 2020, Private Torres disobeyed direct orders to abandon a group of civilian families in an active combat zone. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. One of the panel officers leaned forward. And what were the consequences of this disobedience? Private Torres stayed behind to help evacuate 3 families while his unit retreated. He maintained his position under heavy enemy fire, ensuring the civilians reached safety. Jackson's gaze met Judge Torres's. He gave his life protecting others, sir. And why wasn't this information included in the official record? Another officer asked. The original evacuation orders came from General Matthews. Acknowledging Private Torres's actions would have exposed the general's tactical error in ordering the abandonment of civilians. The truth was deliberately obscured to protect the chain of command. The panel members exchanged troubled looks. The lead officer turned to Jackson. Sergeant Thornfield, you're aware this hearing concerns your right to wear the Medal of Honor during your duties at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Why are you presenting evidence about Private Torres? Jackson sat straighter, his voice firm. Because this hearing isn't just about my medal, sir. It's about what the medal represents. The sacrifice of all soldiers, recognized and unrecognized. Private Torres's heroism deserves acknowledgement even if it means I must step down from my position. Shocked whispers filled the courtroom. Rebecca stepped forward. Sergeant, are you saying you're willing to leave your post at the Tomb Guard? Yes, ma'am. Jackson's words carried clearly through the hushed room. I'm requesting a transfer to a combat unit. The Tomb Guard is the greatest honor of my life, but true service sometimes means giving up what you love most. Private Torres understood that when he stayed behind to save those families. Judge Torres stood suddenly. Permission to address the court? The lead officer nodded, surprise evident on his face. I move to withdraw all charges and legal challenges against Staff Sergeant Thornfield. Torres's voice trembled slightly. Furthermore, I wish to testify about my own actions and motivations in this case. After receiving permission, Torres moved to the witness stand as Jackson returned to his seat. The judge's usual commanding presence was tempered by humility as he faced the panel. I initiated these proceedings out of grief and bitterness, Torres admitted. I couldn't bear seeing other soldiers honored while my son's sacrifice remained unknown. But Sergeant Thornfield showed me that diminishing one hero's recognition doesn't elevate another's sacrifice. Torres turned to face Jackson. This man risked his life to save mine during yesterday's attack, despite knowing I was trying to destroy his career. And today, he's willing to give up his position to ensure my son's story is told. That's the kind of selfless service the Medal of Honor represents. The lead officer leaned forward. Judge Torres, are you saying you no longer object to Sergeant Thornfield wearing his medal during his duties? Not only do I withdraw my objection, sir, I believe Sergeant Thornfield exemplifies exactly why the medal exists. Torres's voice grew stronger. He shows us that true heroism isn't about personal glory. It's about sacrifice for others, just like my son did. The panel called a brief recess to confer. When they returned, the lead officer's expression had softened. This hearing has revealed matters that go far beyond its original scope, he announced. First, we order an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding Private Daniel Torres's death, with a view toward posthumous recognition of his heroism. Judge Torres's shoulders sagged with relief as the officer continued. Second, regarding Staff Sergeant Thornfield, not only do we affirm your right to wear the Medal of Honor during your duties, we deny your request for transfer. The officer allowed himself a small smile. The Tomb Guard needs soldiers who understand the true meaning of sacrifice. You've proven today that you embody that understanding more than ever. Jackson stood at attention, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, sir. Furthermore, the officer added, we recommend a formal review of all cases where Judge Torres's previous challenges affected other Medal of Honor recipients. Those veterans deserve to have their honors restored. As the hearing concluded, Jackson and Torres met in the center of the courtroom. The morning sunlight had shifted, illuminating them both in its warm glow. Thank you, Torres said quietly, for helping me see the truth about Daniel, and about myself. Your son was a hero, sir, Jackson replied. Now everyone will know it. You were willing to give up everything to make that happen. Torres shook his head in wonder. I finally understand what that medal really means. Jackson touched the medal on his chest, feeling its weight, not as a burden now, but as a bridge between all who had sacrificed for others, named and unnamed, honored and unsung. It means we serve something greater than ourselves, he said, just like Daniel did. The courtroom slowly emptied around them, leaving two men who had found redemption not in victory over each other, but in honoring the sacred trust they both served. 6 months after the hearing, Arlington National Cemetery glowed in the crisp autumn sunlight. Red and gold leaves drifted across perfectly aligned headstones as hundreds gathered for a special ceremony at the Memorial Amphitheater. Jackson stood at attention in his dress blues, his Medal of Honor catching the morning light. Beside him, Judge Harrison Torres waited with dignified composure, though his hands trembled slightly as he held a framed photograph of Daniel in his dress uniform. The amphitheater's marble columns framed the solemn gathering of military officials, politicians, and veterans who had come to witness Private Daniel Torres receive his posthumous Medal of Honor. In the front row sat 3 Afghan families, the very ones Daniel had died protecting, flown in specially for the ceremony. General Thompson, who had led the investigation into Daniel's actions, approached the podium. His voice carried clearly across the hushed crowd. Private Daniel James Torres exemplified the highest traditions of military service, he began. On April 15, 2020, with complete disregard for his own safety, Private Torres remained behind under heavy enemy fire to protect civilian families during an evacuation operation. Judge Torres's breath caught as he listened to his son's story finally being told. Despite direct orders to withdraw, Private Torres refused to abandon innocent civilians in harm's way. His actions saved 18 lives, including 9 children. He maintained his position until every civilian was safely evacuated, before succumbing to enemy fire. Jackson watched as tears rolled silently down Torres's cheeks. Private Torres's extraordinary heroism and selfless sacrifice reflect great credit upon himself, the United States Army, and the United States of America. General Thompson's voice softened. It is my profound honor to present this Medal of Honor to Judge Harrison Torres, on behalf of his son. Torres stepped forward, Jackson at his side for support. As the general draped the medal's blue ribbon around the photograph frame, Torres touched the gold medallion with trembling fingers. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. "Thank you for remembering him." After the ceremony, Torres took the podium himself. His bearing had changed. The bitterness that had haunted him for so long replaced by purpose and peace. Today marks not just the recognition of my son's sacrifice, but a new chapter in how we honor all our military heroes, he announced. I am retiring from the federal bench to establish the Daniel Torres Foundation for Unsung Heroes. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Jackson smiled, having helped Torres develop this plan over the past months. This foundation will work to identify and recognize service members whose acts of valor may have gone unnoticed or unrecorded, Torres continued. Additionally, I have withdrawn all legal challenges against Medal of Honor recipients, and I offer my deepest apologies to those veterans whose recognition I questioned. He turned to look at Jackson. I learned from Staff Sergeant Thornfield that honoring one hero's sacrifice does not diminish another's. Rather, it elevates us all. General Thompson returned to the podium to make one final announcement. Speaking of Staff Sergeant Thornfield, I am pleased to announce his promotion to Master Sergeant and his appointment as director of our new Forgotten Veterans Recognition Program, working in partnership with the Daniel Torres Foundation. Jackson stood at attention as appreciative applause filled the amphitheater. His new role would allow him to continue his duties at the tomb while helping ensure other forgotten heroes received their due recognition. After the ceremony, Jackson and Torres stood together at Daniel's grave. The fresh Medal of Honor citation gleamed on the white marble headstone. I spent years angry that Daniel's sacrifice went unrecognized, Torres said quietly. I never imagined that seeking justice for him would come through learning to honor others. Jackson nodded. Your son's legacy will live on through every forgotten hero the Foundation helps recognize. You know, when I first saw you wearing your medal at the tomb, I thought you were displaying it out of pride. Torres shook his head. I understand now what you meant about it representing every soldier who never came home. Daniel earned his place among those heroes, Jackson replied, and now everyone will know his story. They stood in companionable silence as the autumn wind rustled through the trees. Around them, the endless rows of white headstones stretched into the distance, each one marking a story of service and sacrifice, some known, others still waiting to be told. The Foundation's first case is already lined up, Torres said. A Marine who saved his entire squad in Fallujah. No recognition because the mission was classified. We'll make it right, Jackson assured him. One hero at a time. Torres placed his hand on his son's headstone. The Medal of Honor citation caught the fading sunlight, a bright point of honor among the shadows lengthening across Arlington's hallowed ground. Daniel would be proud, Jackson said softly. Not just of his medal, but of what you're doing to help others. He taught me what real honor means, Torres replied. Just like you did. He straightened up, squaring his shoulders. We have work to do, Master Sergeant. There are more heroes waiting to be remembered. Together they walked through the quiet cemetery, two men transformed by their journey from adversaries to allies, united in their mission to ensure no hero's sacrifice would ever again go unrecognized. Winter sunlight streamed through the windows of the Daniel Torres Foundation's new offices, just a short drive from Arlington National Cemetery. The walls, still bare except for Daniel's Medal of Honor and photograph, waited for the stories of other forgotten heroes to join them. Jackson sat at his desk reviewing case files with Rebecca Sterling. Their hands brushed as they exchanged documents, a casual intimacy that had developed over the months since the hearing. What had started as a professional partnership during the crisis had blossomed into something deeper, strengthened by their shared commitment to honoring forgotten heroes. "This one looks promising," Rebecca said, pushing a folder across the desk. "Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, 2018, saved her entire unit during a classified operation in Syria, but the paperwork got buried because of political sensitivities." Jackson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Add it to our priority list. We'll present it to the board next week." Rebecca smiled, watching him work. The same dedication he'd once brought to guarding the tomb now fueled his mission to uncover forgotten acts of valor. Though he no longer wore the tomb guard's distinctive uniform, his commitment to honoring sacrifice remained unchanged. "You miss it, don't you?" she asked softly. "The tomb duty?" Jackson looked out the window toward Arlington, its white headstones visible in the distance. "Every day," he admitted. "But this work, it's a different kind of service, just as important." Rebecca reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "You're still honoring them, Jackson, just in a new way." Their moment was interrupted by Harrison Torres's arrival. The former judge entered carrying a stack of files, his demeanor worlds away from the bitter man who had once threatened Jackson's career. Purpose had replaced his grief, determination, his anger. "Good morning," Torres said, setting down the files. "We've got 5 new cases for review, all thoroughly vetted, and the Pentagon finally approved access to the classified records we requested." Jackson stood to help organize the files. That's thanks to Rebecca's legal work. She found a way through the bureaucratic maze. "I had good motivation," Rebecca said, sharing a warm look with Jackson that didn't go unnoticed by Torres. The former judge smiled, remembering how their relationship had evolved from attorney and client to something much more meaningful. He'd watched their connection deepen as they worked together, turning the foundation from an idea into reality. "We've got a ceremony next week," Torres announced. "Private First Class James Chen. His family's flying in from San Francisco." Jackson nodded, understanding the weight of these moments. Each ceremony represented another hero finally receiving their due recognition, another family finding closure. "I'll coordinate with Arlington," Rebecca offered. "We can hold it at the Memorial Amphitheater, like we did for Daniel's ceremony." Torres's expression softened at the mention of his son's ceremony. "Thank you, both of you. This foundation, it's becoming everything Daniel would have wanted." Jackson moved to the window, looking out over Arlington's hallowed ground. "Every time we recognize one of these heroes, we honor them all. That's what I learned at the tomb. Every unknown soldier represents all of them. Every story we uncover helps tell the larger story." Rebecca joined him at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "You taught us all that, Jackson, even when it meant risking everything." Torres watched them, seeing how naturally they gravitated toward each other. Their relationship had grown organically through shared purpose and mutual respect, deepening with each case they tackled together. "I have a meeting with General Thompson this afternoon," Torres said. "We're discussing expanding the Foundation's scope to include intelligence operations. There are countless classified missions where heroes never received recognition because of security concerns." "We'll find a way to honor them," Jackson assured him. "Even if we can't tell their whole stories, we can make sure their sacrifice is acknowledged." Rebecca gathered her notes, her hand lingering on Jackson's arm. "I should head to my office. I've got depositions to prepare for the Rodriguez case." "Dinner tonight?" Jackson asked softly. 7 o'clock, she confirmed with a smile. After Rebecca left, Torres turned to Jackson. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were everything my son wasn't. Recognized, honored, celebrated. I couldn't have been more wrong." "We were both fighting for the same thing," Jackson replied. "We just didn't know it then." "Daniel would have liked you," Torres said. "You have the same heart, the same commitment to doing what's right regardless of the cost." Jackson picked up the next case file, ready to begin another day of ensuring no hero's sacrifice went unrecognized. This was his mission now, not standing guard over unknown soldiers, but bringing their stories to light. "We've got work to do," he said, opening the file. Torres nodded, taking his seat across from Jackson's desk. Together they began reviewing the next case, two men united by their shared purpose, their former conflict transformed into something powerful and healing. Through the window, Arlington's endless rows of white headstones stretched into the distance. Jackson might no longer walk the 21 steps of the tomb guard, but he still served as a guardian of memory, working to ensure that every hero's story would find its way home. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.